Hey everyone, welcome back. Let's get right into it. Vericres is one of the Tennocon drops from a few days ago, alongside the Reinala Sugatra and a fully crafted Titania Prime. You could only get them if you had a linked Warframe account to your Twitch when you were watching Tennocon. But don't fret, as last year's Tennocon's items eventually showed up at Barrow towards the end of the year. This is the only actually new piece of usable gear. We originally saw this exact fan design teased when the Orphix Venom preview was coming in a dev stream almost 2 years ago. It was shown as an unnamed warfan among a bunch of other sentient-themed weapon designs. No longer tied to sentience, it was probably shelved indefinitely and repurposed for Tennocon. Just like the Vastlock from last year, that appeared to have melee 2.0 low stats and used the old melee combo system until it was hotfixed. We even saw the Vericres Codex entry prematurely added during the Angels update 3 months ago, before it was removed. The Warfan itself has rather average stats, so what sets it apart? Vericres is a more crit-oriented Gunsen. Why do I compare it to Gunsen? Unlike Quasis or Aram Spinoza, both of which shipped with Deimos, using the heavy attack of the Vericres does not do anything extra. Quasis throws an array of 12 and 6 knives that scale off the weapon and inherits almost all mods. Every knife thrown force procs slash, which is why Quasis is so lethal. It's a 100% force / ranged melee when used at its strongest, and even has 2.5 meter punch through. Aram Spinoza does not have force slash on its thrown darts with a heavy attack, however the weapon boasts sizable status. Innate toxin on the throws and even more multi-shot at 18 and 9 darts per attack. While Aram Spinoza lacks punch through or the force slash, it has much higher raw damage than the Quasis, swings extremely fast, is actually amazing even as a normal melee weapon, and unlike the Quasis, also has sky-high disposition that puts it to shame. It also held a niche as the perfect armor stripper and primer at the same time to replace Sarpa, before Vastlock came into the picture. Every dart or knife from either of these two weapons also have a baseline value of 2.5 times final damage on the first throw, and 5 times total damage on the second throw. Both weapons also have absolutely zero fall off on their throwing knives over their entire 35 meter range distance. Gunsen, on the other hand, was the literal best-in-class normal melee warfan with absurdly high slash weight, attack speed, and disposition. So if you're looking for a ranged damage, neither Gunsen nor Vericres can compete in any capacity. We're thus restricted to only comparing Vericres in normal melee scenarios. Keep in mind, the biggest con here is that every single warfan is 1.0 disposition or higher, with Gunsen being 1.35. Vericres, being a new weapon, has a ribbon disposition of just 0.5. So if you consider ribbon setups, Gunsen already massively outperforms Vericres. But I want this weapon to be compared fairly with builds anyone can use that isn't restricted by RNG, so I will not be considering disposition when comparing Gunsen to Vericres today. I'm going to briefly show the two builds I'm using, which is the recommended pure / quick melee spam Vericres build. Gunsen will be using an identical setup, but please be aware this is actually not the optimal Gunsen build. It is a very minor change, but I'll be using equal builds for easier comparisons between two /focused hybrid built quick melee warfans. The first thing to compare is the raw damage of these two weapons. Vericres has 180 damage, whereas Gunsen has 160. This means per hit, irrespective of crits, Vericres does 12.5% more raw damage. Using the build I've shown here, Vericres reaches 118.8% crit chance with a 3.8 crit multiplier. This corresponds to 4.3264 times normalized damage. The same build on Gunsen only reaches 86.4% crit chance with a 3.8 crit multiplier, which is 3.4192 times normalized damage. Once you take the raw damage gap and crits into consideration, Vericres outdamages Gunsen by 42.35% final damage per swing. This seems like a pretty big gap, but there are many other things to take in consideration that are not related to raw damage. While it is clear Vericres seems 1.4235 times stronger if I hit an enemy once, these are slash-based weapons. This means innate slash weight, status chance, and attack speed for frequency as status application all matter significantly. Gunsen is 80% slash weight, whereas Vericres is 72%. This means Gunsen is relatively 11.1% more likely to proc slash compared to Vericres. But that is not all. Gunsen is base 28% status chance, whereas Vericres is base 20. This is a relative gap of 40%, and this means in absolute terms, Gunsen will produce 55.4% more slash procs per hit than Vericres. Finally, Gunsen has a base attack speed of 1.17, whereas Vericres has an attack speed of 1.0, meaning Gunsen will also apply slash procs 17% faster than Vericres, resulting in a grand total of 81.2% or 1.812 times more slash procs produced by Gunsen than Vericres per second. Since slash is much more potent and scalable than raw damage, this is why I made the judgment of the superior weapon with regards to bleeds instead of corrosive builds. The 1.812 times more slash procs per second Gunsen provides outclasses the extra 1.4235 times more damage Vericres applies per swing that is used to scale into slash. Therefore, Gunsen, even with a suboptimal build, is already superior. If you want to see a full breakdown on Gunsen and how strong it can be, I suggest you to check out my Votive Onslaught video in the top right. In reality, I would recommend actually dropping Spring-Loaded Blade on Gunsen for Gladiator Might, because this will boost it into a consistent 104% crit chance, with a 5.0 crit multiplier instead of 3.8, while you do drop from 6.7 to 4.7 meter range. For the insane amounts of bleed procs both Warfans put out, I would rather the more consistent crits than the 2 meter extra range. This will massively improve the weapon's DPS while acquiring consistency. Weapons like Kratos and Kronen don't have this problem, since both of them surpass 100% crit with a just blood rush. And while you may say this does seem similar to the Kratos vs Kronen debate, recall I only said Kratos is superior to Kronen Prime, because of the sheer amount of quality of life bonuses Kratos provides in comparison to Kronen, whereas Kronen had only slightly more damage. Vericres has 0 quality of life upgrades compared to Gunsen, and is thus strictly inferior for bleed builds. The build for Vericres remains the same as what I originally showcased, being a hybrid build with bonus range. As the weapon reaches over 100% crit with just Blood Rush, I opted for Spring-Loaded Blade instead of Gladiator Might. We do not need more damage on this weapon, as Warfans in general are very strong now with bleeds, and even if this weapon is worse at bleeds than Gunsen. Kratos has 200 base damage, 80% base slash, and 0.6 follow through on the amazing Sovereign Outcast stance. If you didn't know about this stance yet, please go check out my Kratos video at the top right. Vericres has 180 base damage, 72% base slash, and 0.7 follow through on an also amazing Votive Onslaught stance. Now, if you didn't know, Votive Onslaught is one of the most insane stances in the game and comes close to rivaling Sovereign. This stance is the reason why Warfans are underappreciated, because Votive only released with Corpus Railjack about 2 years ago. Prior to this, we only had Slicing Feathers, which is an abysmal stance with horrible multipliers, mobility problems, and animation locks. Just look at this. The Sovereign Outcast stance everyone swears by has 859.6% normalized damage per second. Good motion values, tons of horizontal hits, and 800% force slash as part of the combo. Votive Onslaught, on the other hand, has 778.2% normalized damage per second, not as good, but still desirable motion values, tons of horizontal hits, as well as a vertical hit that can headshot, and 300% force slash at the end of the combo with a knockdown that allows a finisher. Ground finishers with Warfans do 1000% damage with force proc slash and are absolutely lethal, and uniquely can also hit multiple enemies at once. The forward melee on Votive Onslaught also has complete freedom movement with pure horizontal swipes and many hits. But more importantly, while Sovereign Outcast has 800% slash and Votive quote-unquote only has 300%, remember we're using a weapon that has 72% and 80% slash weight. The majority of the hits already will proc slash, and the stance force procs are just a small bonus for Kratos, Kronen, Gunsen, and Vericres on top of their natural bleeds. This is hopefully a wake-up call to those that love Kronen but might be getting bored of it. The closest thing I can recommend trying out that will give the same hack and slash feel are Vericres and Gunsen with the Votive Onslaught stance. Now, I'm not saying Vericres is a bad weapon at all. In fact, it's a very, very strong one. However, we have a case of primed weapon syndrome here. Gunsen is literally Vericres Prime in the sense that it does everything Vericres wants to do on a bleed build, but slightly better. It has better attack speed, and better bleeds, and also better disposition. If you for some reason want to use the Vericres instead, it will still absolutely destroy Steel Path and can scale into endurance, but to me it's also uglier than the Gunsen for fashion, so I won't be using it. Condition Overload is actually mandatory for this weapon on slash setup since it isn't an Inodem. Both Gunsen and Vericres have comparatively low base damage for a melee weapon, and will struggle to kill without the statuses to pile on base damage scaling. Prime Reach is also mandatory since Vericres has a base range of only 1.8 meters, which is tiny by melee standards. You nearly triple the weapon's base range with this mod. Spring-loaded eases this to 6.8 meters. If you must absolutely have a longer range normal melee warfan, and you refuse to accept anything less than guaranteed crits, then this is your answer. Just keep in mind that even if Gunsen uses the same build, which is suboptimal like I said earlier with the occasional white numbers popping up, it will still out DPS Vericres. Weeping Wounds boost this weapon to 108% status chance for consistent status application every swing, and Blood Rush to hit 118.8% crit. Prime Smites are mandatory because they double dip on status builds for 2.4 times more bleed damage. Primed Fury is recommended since the base motion value of Warfans are only slightly above normal as a weapon class. However, if you're using Arcane Strike or stacking Warframe speed buffs, you can run Gladiator Might in the slot instead. The performance of Vericres is expected, absolutely decimating enemies with the ridiculous amount of slash procs it produces, insane finisher one-shot bleeds, very comfortable range to engage, sufficient follow-through to still kill enemies with its double range build, expedited with a fast TTK from slash bypassing armor, and just all-around smooth stance animations. But again, Gunsen is a craftable weapon from the Tenno lab in the dojo, whereas Vericres is a limited time event item. You may wonder if there is anything Vericres can do better than Gunsen. There is actually. It's called a raw damage build. You might also recall me saying this weapon is too weak to run corrosive. This is true, but that is because I look at the absolute scaling of weapon build options, and baseline with Steel Path. A corrosive build on this weapon actually destroys base level Steel Path quite well, but still wants a primer due to low base damage. It's just that the low base damage and average crit splits means corrosive Vericres builds will fall off very early in endurance, since you are not leveraging the weapon's strengths and instead highlighting its weaknesses. If you wanted a corrosive build for this warfan, it requires different polarities, but the setup would look like this. The reason why I don't recommend doing this is because there are much better options for raw damage setups. Ironically, the Quasis Warfan, known for its throwing knives, would massively out DPS Vericres on a corrosive build because it adds 230 base damage instead of 180, and 30% crit chance instead of 22. But yes, if you really want to use it, the only thing that would change include dropping 2 mods to run Prime Fever Strike and Shocking Touch. The first mod to drop will 100% be Spring-Loaded Blade, however, the second mod to drop has options. Weeping Wounds will push you above 100% status and near guarantee you proc corrosive every hit, which will temporarily strip armor, and help you deal with tankier enemies on early Steel Path. If you do not feel the armor strip is necessary or wanted, then dropping Weeping for Shocking Touch is the best option. If you feel you need the temporary armor strip, then now you need to decide between dropping Primed Fury and relying entirely on Arcane Strike or Warframe speed buffs, or dropping Prime Smites and accepting the loss of 55% final damage scaling per hit, which does not double dip on raw damage builds. I would personally recommend dropping Prime Fury, as this has the best performance if you want your corrosive build to scale as far as possible in earlier Steel Path before you're forced to run the slash build. All builds shown today requiring a primer to make up for Vericres having low base damage and average crit stats. Otherwise, your corrosive or slash setups will take way too long to kill enemies. You can take whatever primer you want, but normally I would recommend a Viral Radiation Epitaph because it also innately has cold to slow enemies in a larger area. Primed Fulmination is optional to your taste, but more importantly, consider bringing Augur mods if you're running a Shield Gate frame build for the set bonus. Nucore is another popular option since you can get innate secondary elements on it as a Kuvra progenitor that will not combine with mods. I normally recommend a Magnetic Nucore for priming or an Impact one for more niche setups. Magnetic is a lot more common and intuitive to build. But essentially, you just put Viral and Heat mods on, Multi-Shot and Fire Rate, and then free slots for Augur mods and or Seeker for Punch Through for bonus chaining. The Impact one can also apply Slash with Hemorrhage, but this is only useful if you can one-shot an enemy, otherwise there's no point pre-priming Slash since your weapon will inflict it very quickly after the first hit. AKA, Hemorrhage Nucore primers are only relevant on Condition Overload heavy attack builds that kill instantly. Pistol Ammo Mutation also helps regen primer ammo, and Dexterity Arcanes give your melee bonus combo duration. Slotting Dexterity on your primary weapon as well grants your melee a total of 15 seconds additional duration before combo expires, which you can combine with Narumon to minimize combo loss consequences on Power Spike. And there you go, a full breakdown of everything Vericres and where it stands in the current meta. While it is actually a very powerful melee, it is still strictly inferior to Gunsen on slash builds and has no distinguishing quirk to make it unique. On the lesser recommended raw corrosive build, it surpasses a corrosive Gunsen but also falls behind a raw corrosive Quasis built for normal melee spam, which is also a not recommended build for Quasis to start with. If you have already built up performance of Vericres, great. it slaps, but if you're considering whether it is worth investing into this weapon, I would strongly recommend instead looking at Gunsen, which is more accessible for a normal melee/warfan, especially because of the better ribbon options, or Quasis if you really want a corrosive normal melee warfan. On the bright side, I'm hoping this video has brought more attention to warfans as a whole, as they are a massive powerhouse archetype that has been largely ignored due to the late addition of Votive Onslaught only about 2 years ago, without nearly rivals Sovereign Outcast. I hope you've learned something today, and remember, the choice is yours, Tenno. If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get you new information out always as soon as possible, like I've done with covering the new Echoes of Zeraman update. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis. You don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.